You're listening to The Real Short Box, a comic book podcast made for geeks by geeks.
Shredder attacks. These turtle boys don't cut him no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Splinter taught them to be ninja teens. He's a radical rat.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for listening to The Real Short Box. My name is Donald. Kevin?
My name is Dr. Splinter, Kevin. Or Kevin Splinter.
Sure.
Sure, we'll take that.
Yeah.
I'm Spartacus. Oh, wait, wrong comic.
Wrong movie.
Yeah, wrong everything.
Wrong everything.
All right.
He's been drinking.
I think I say Casey Jones or something.
You know, I've been having some personal issues lately, but I'm going to channel my inner Leonardo.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to, lead the bunch, but not really.
Well, unless you're in the movies, and it's kind of Raphael, right?
Who's the leader?
Anyway, what we're talking about here,
What?
we're going to be discussing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
One of the greatest independent comics ever created.
You know what? I'm going to take it a step further. This is the most popular independent comic turned massive intellectual property I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Probably everyone's lifetime here, and maybe everybody listening. We don't know.
We don't know how old you are.
Yeah.
But I know
You
that
could be
you're old
12.
enough. We know that you're old enough to know who the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are. And if you
God.
don't, you got some serious problems.
We'll slap your faces. Every one of you. But this is going to be a little two-parter, actually. So this is going to be part one. And in this part, we're going to be discussing a little bit about the history of the Ninja Turtles, as well as, of course, the comic books. You know, get a little bit in-depth under the sheets, so to speak. This is sexy talk with the Ninja Turtles.
And the cartoons.
Yeah. And so, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and get us started on this adventure of a lifetime?
Okay. The story begins with two young men from New Hampshire.
Ah, yes.
With a population of 101,000 people.
Give or take a little bit more, but yes, give or take. You know, that's where the presidential primaries begin.
Do you know, actually, New Hampshire as well, I've heard when crab is in season, holy crap, people get tired of eating it because it's so cheap.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And then everybody's like, I got crabs.
Yeah, Maine lobster as well.
Nah,
Nice.
I'm good on all that.
But these two New Hampshire boys had a dream. They were already creating little comics called Fugatoid. You ever heard of Fugatoid? That was like one of the first little independent comics they were working on.
No, but I've heard of Freakazoid.
Freakazoid a little different.
And
yeah.
I've heard of the Noid.
You were
The
supposed to
Noid.
avoid that, yeah.
Yeah, the Noid. Supposed to avoid the Noid. Oh, well, I kind of
Pretty
missed the Noid.
Kind of exposing our lack of knowledge on the Fukazoid.
It's
Yeah.
okay. But Fugatoid was the little independent comic they were working on for a little period of time, and in between, they're coming up with a new character. So Eastman, by accident, just screwing around, drew a anthropomorphic turtle with weapons. So they're laughing their butts off, thinking it's funny. My chances are they probably were high on something. They were probably smoking.
Maybe. Well,
What?
and then they talk about, like, they were like, well, you're either a teenager in the comics, a
Yeah.
mutant,
Yeah.
or, like, you're a ninja.
Yes.
Or some type of animal or something, you
Yes.
know?
So they had a eureka moment and said, you know what? Let's make this our next project.
I'm not going to assume they were high.
Nah, not at all.
Okay.
So they decided, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because like you said, a teenage, a mutant, a Ninja Turtle. So what they did was Frank Miller, Jack Kirby were some of their favorite artists. And some of the books that they were reading at the time that they were into was Ronin, Daredevil, Cerebus, and of course, New Mutants.
Right, which makes sense because in Daredevil, the villainous organization was the Hand.
Was the Hand, and of course for them it would be the
Foot.
Foot Clan.
In the Ninja Turtles, yeah.
And then Splinter, of course, comes from Stick.
Right.
Yes.
And you could also, by mentioning Daredevil had a tremendous run around that time as well. It was
And
one of, if not the most
influential.
popular comic
And
books.
it was very influential on them. Even the origins of the Turtles, of course, being, you know, with the
ooze,
The
kind of,
ooze.
they gave him the powers, which is also what happened to Daredevil. He had some
Yes.
toxic waste
Yes.
happen to get on him, and that's how he lost his sight and
He had to
gained
develop
the
his
power.
senses.
Yeah, exactly.
You got it. So, in March 1984, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman created a new company called Mirage Studios. Now, what's interesting about why they called it Mirage Studios was because, guess what? There was no studio at all.
Decoys! Decoys!
It's like my apartment is a suite.
Yes. And they basically were using Laird's living room to do their work. And they decided, okay, we're going to take Eastman took his $500 tax return, and Laird emptied out his bank account and also borrowed $1,300 from Eastman's uncle to print 3,000 copies of the very first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book.
3,000 copies for
The very first comic book, which was... What was it?
Well, before that, there was a little ad for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for Gobbledygook #1, which, by the way, there's only about 50 in existence.
Ooh.
And if you have at least $6,000, maybe you can get one. But also, buyer beware, that is also known for being a counterfeited book.
Yes. Very highly counterfeited.
Much like the Michael Jordan rookie card, the Fleer one.
That would actually make perfect sense, because when you have a limited run on something, you obviously want to give the impression, oh, wait, we have found new ones. No, of course they didn't. There are 50 in existence. That's a real fact. just no.
Now, the good news is, when they put the ad out, they also put an ad out in, I think it was Comics Buyer's Guide, and that also was the thing that got people pumped up back then for people to buy the comic. And they sold out their 3,000 copies fairly quickly. And another 6,000 were printed.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys actually made a nice little profit right away. Now, it took a little bit of time until early 1985 before issue 2 came out. And they got orders for 15,000 copies, which, of course, sold out.
Now, Kevin, if I can just stop you for a second, there is a movie franchise that is fresh in my head that I'm thinking of that was also extremely popular and may have had something to do with the popularity of the Ninja Turtles. Could it be The Karate Kid?
Perhaps.
No, perhaps. This was actually, at least according to the internet. So, yeah, that was a very popular thing at the time. So these karate turtles, or, however you want to put it, it fit in perfectly with a growing trend in entertainment.
Wait,
True.
no, I have to agree with you.
Everything just kind of builds upon itself. Yeah.
That's true. And you know what? They came out the same year, 1984. So you're absolutely right. Ralph Macchio helped push the product.
Yes.
Like a knight in shining armor from a long time ago.
And I will be your man who will fight for
Okay.
your honor.
Name, besides The Karate Kid, name 2 other movies that Ralph Macchio was in.
My Cousin Vinny, The Outsiders.
Boom, you got him. There's the 2 big ones.
Those are the 2 big ones, no question about it.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
you're messed up, man.
What? That's just asking. A lot of people don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just a reaffirmation. We know what we're talking about. We were not looking that up on the internet. We know our stuff. Come to us. We are encyclopedias for all this stuff.
Yes, we are. Now, this, of course, helped lead a boom in the mid-1980s for black and white comics. As you know, Donald, were very popular. A lot of independents were busting out the black and white comics. It was very,
Yeah, first of all, they were cheaper to make, weren't they?
Yeah, cheap newsprint. It's kind of like the avant-garde of comics during that time.
Yeah.
And there were some knockoffs that try to copy the Ninja Turtles. I'll name you a couple.
Hey, hang on. There was a radioactive hamster or something, right?
Yes, adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters.
Yeah, okay.
Remo Williams.
Sure. Another one was called Karate Creatures.
Okay.
Another one was called Adult Thermonuclear Samurai Elephants. I don't know how that would have worked.
That sounds amazing.
It kind of does.
Adult Thermonuclear Samurai Elephants.
I need to get my hands on one of those.
Dude, it's like if the Flaming Carrot knew Kung Fu.
Kind of, yeah. And I'm sure he could come up with that. Some kung fu-ery.
Now here's my favorite one. Preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos.
Whoa, you almost got dirty there.
Yeah, that name preteen in the 90s had a very different connotation.
Yep, still does, kind of, to this day.
A little bit.
To this day.
Now, the first issue sold for $1.50, but as you know, Donald, and you want one from me, of course, if you want a first print copy, it's going to cost you a bare minimum, and I mean a bare minimum, of $2,000.
Donald, here is your moment live to negotiate with Kevin for our very dedicated audience.
Yeah, negotiate.
I'll be nice to you for the rest of your life.
Really?
Yeah.
You think you could be nice for the next 62 years?
I think... Wow. Yeah, that's a bold prediction there.
Yeah, I plan on tapping out at age 102.
102, okay. Well, I don't know if I'll make it that far. The family lifeline is not so long here, so you probably only have to worry about me till I'm like 65.
Well, then send your Obi-Wan Kenobi ghost to be nice then.
Okay. Or, yeah, sure.
There we go.
Okay.
And sold. Pick up your merchandise at the end.
Yay! I bought a Ninja Turtles book. With kindness.
Dignity and respect was the price.
So,
Now, continuing on. Now, different artists, because it came to a point after a few issues that they were so busy they were able to sell the rights off for, as you know, the cartoon and other merchandise that they essentially became, little mini tycoons, Laird and Eastman. So they hired other artists such as Michael Dooney, Eric Talbot, A.C. Farley, Ryan Brown, Steve Levine, Steve Murphy, and Jim Lawson to help continue their work at Mirage on working on the Ninja Turtle books.
mm-hmm.
I actually have a friend with one of those names. I will not reveal who.
Really?
First and last name matches perfectly.
Well, you don't say.
I wonder if they've worked on Ninja Turtles.
Hopefully not sexually.
Hopefully not.
Eesh. Yeah.
Now, throughout the years, the original series, after the original series, there's only about 3 other volumes that lasted a short period of time, including the Archie miniseries. That only until 2011, we had the IDW take over the publishing rights, where you now have a continuous series going out over 200 issues, which, by the way, was not too bad.
They killed off Donatello.
Yes, they killed off Donatello, unfortunately.
Had a problem with that.
Well, we both do.
Yeah.
But maybe some way they can resurrect him.
And it was like Rocksteady and Bebop that did it.
Wow, those punks did it?
Yeah,
it's
that's
fucked
very
up.
hard to believe.
Now, I can understand if, they're in a Technodrome and Krang sets them up and he sees he's trapped.
No,
and
I think they had like a pry bar or something. They just beat him over the shell in the head until it cracked.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that's interesting about the Ninja Turtles is the origins of their names. Now, originally, the guys wanted to use Japanese names to name the turtles, but they realized they couldn't really find anything authentic that would make sense, or that they felt that'd be realistic. So instead, they said, they had an art book, and they said, let's go for these. And they picked their 4 favorite artists: Leonardo, Michelangelo. Although they wrote it Michelangelo by accident, they spelt it wrong until years later when they finally corrected it. Raphael, and of course, Donatello.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the Archie series, though, that came out in 1988. That ran for a while, too. They had the mini-series, I think it was like a 4-parter.
Yeah, 4-parter.
Or was it 3? I think it was 3. It was a 3-issue mini-series, and it was $1 an issue. I think it was the first issue had the first appearance of Rocksteady and Bebop. They did not exist in the Mirage Studios version. They were created solely for the comic and the cartoon.
That's true.
And-
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go right ahead. Sorry.
Also, April O'Neil was not
a reporter.
Yeah, so they.
Matter of fact, if I recall, she was assistant for Baxter Stockman.
Mm-hmm. Yep. She was a scientific assistant.
And Kevin, would you mind elaborating a bit about the inspiration behind the names for the Ninja Turtles, just in case we have a younger audience that might not know the origin?
Okay. During the Italian Renaissance, they were great masters of art. They were sculptors, painters, inventors. So Leonardo was probably the one that most people in the audience might be familiar with. Would be named after Leonardo da Vinci.
Painted the Mona Lisa.
Correct?
Or I like to call the Moaning Lisa.
Oh.
Man, you are into the plane types.
No,
my
it's the
goodness.
Moaning Lisa Blues. Remember that?
Ah.
That's why I got a case of the Moaning Lisa Blues.
And then you had Michelangelo, if I'm saying his last name right, Buonarroti, something like that.
It does end in an E sound.
Language, Kevin.
Yes. Now, that was interesting, man. He did indeed paint the Sistine Chapel, but he was also known as an excellent sculptor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Did he do the statue of David?
Yes, he did.
Oh, wow. See, and guys, we know this all off the top of our heads. I can't stress this enough. Please put $1 in our donation bin.
Yes.
We have a donation bin?
But if you want to get a history lesson, please research those 4 masters. You will learn a lot and definitely appreciate their art, especially Leonardo da Vinci. My goodness, that man was a man ahead of his time. He basically invented the helicopter before it actually came out.
I'm always in awe when I just think about these artists, and I just think it's a brilliant way to have inspiration for hero characters.
Absolutely. And by the way, if you have the money, get the Taschen book on Leonardo da Vinci's work. It is excellent.
Taschen?
Taschen. You know, that very fancy, very expensive books that they make?
Oh, I call it Taschen, but maybe
Taschen.
I'm a little redneck.
Well, you know what? Maybe I am. Maybe I'm being redneck. Maybe it's Taschen.
No, you sound a lot more proper.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, very proper.
I see, yes.
Very proper, sir, I say.
Now, one thing I also appreciate was the names of Splinter and, well, actually, Splinter's not actually Hamato Yoshi. He's actually the rat that followed the model of Hamato Roshi. He actually copied his moves. And Hamato Roshi was, of course, a rival of Oroku Saki. And Oroku Saki had him and his wife murdered.
Anyone who can recreate this chain for us verbally, I will be impressed.
Oh. But it's kind of funny to me. It's kind of interesting how a rat could copy and mimic a human being's, martial arts moves and then later teach it to a bunch of mutated turtles. Did you find that interesting, Donald?
Yeah.
He's not sleeping, Kevin.
He's not sleeping.
We're actually we're very entranced in what you're saying.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was still thinking about that Archie series, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. Continue with the Archie series.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It ran for 72 issues.
72 issues?
72 issues.
Oh,
I got
goodness.
most of them in the mail in the brown paper sleeves. You remember those? I don't know if
Yeah, I do.
back before they would put them in plastics and cardboards and send them to you, they would slap them in a little brown paper sleeve. It was open-ended on both ends, and they would just print on it your address on the front and their return address on the front, of course, and then slap it in the mail, and you would get it. Sometimes you get it folded in the middle. Sometimes you get it just jammed in your mailbox and it'd be all completely just screwed. Or other times it just miraculously arrived pristine, which is why, if you don't understand why comic books, you would think, oh, why weren't they kept in better shape? Most kids got this stuff in the mail. They would order it in the mail. They would have a subscription. Or they would pick it up and they would treat it just exactly like they would get it when they got it in the mail. They would just fold it up and put it in their back pockets or whatever. So comic books didn't survive that well in the bygone era, so to speak. And even when I was younger in the 80s, comic books were still kind of a joke in a way. They became more prevalent as, Miller and Moore and, Gaiman and all those other guys stepped in and said, we're going to bring in a little more maturity to the game, to the level of comic books, and they created Vertigo and stuff like that. But before that, it was relatively a big joke, and a lot of that had to do with the Batman television series from the 60s that made it campy. So a lot of the comic books were very cheesy, very campy, because that's what did well on television.
That's true. You followed the influence.
No, I actually had this lecture with my lady the other day. She's like, oh, yeah, I just put them in like that because, after all, they're just comic books. And I said, if everybody would just take that attitude, I wouldn't be able to sell these for anything.
It's true. It's true. It's like you go over there, and if she has any of those nice Disney statues, you just knock them on the floor.
It's a little on the nose.
Yeah.
A little on the nose.
And then she'd be like, what are you doing? Oh, they're just statues.
But what's always fascinating to me with comic books is their value holds up like first prints of novels.
Yeah.
Or blue chip stocks.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can get, for example, an Iron Fist book. It was hot.
It was hot for a while.
When they announced the series. I mean, you couldn't touch it for less than, $500-$600.
It was on fire.
Yeah, it was on fire. Now you can probably touch it again for about $200. But
maybe less.
Before that, you could touch it for about $50.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it went up and it fell back down, but it's still higher than what it was originally when it went up. So these types of first appearances in comic books and stuff are important, which is why it was important for me to not only get the first Rocksteady and Bebop, but also getting the first Casey Jones. And, of course, I know we said in the previous pod that was Raphael #1 that had the first appearance of Casey Jones in it. Casey Jones was a really cool character. I think he was... I can't remember when he was created. Do you remember the year when Casey Jones was created?
Let's see here.
I think it was 1985.
1985.
Yeah. 85 was his first appearance in Raphael, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. It was created by, of course, Eastman and Laird. And it was a cool story, the whole idea of Casey. Same thing with April O'Neil. April O'Neil, even in the Archie series, she became more and more... she wanted to train in the ninja arts. She became more of a strong female character as it went forward in
a damsel in distress
in the Archie series. Yeah, and that was after issue 5 of the comic book for Archie that they handed it over to a couple new writers that took it in a completely different direction and worked with animal rights and human rights and anamorphic type characters and stuff like that. They put a lot of work into it.
Now, one of the things that probably made the Ninja Turtles a absolute worldwide phenomenon was the cartoon, and I think that was very important because the comic book was a little on the dark side.
Yes.
And it had remained that way, probably would never have taken off the way it did. And that's why we have to give a lot of credit to the cartoon that Mr. Darren will talk about.
Well, no, the thing is like, these stark differences include things such as, I mean, Michelangelo. You want to talk about a complete makeover from the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Michelangelo essentially, and this is just my opinion, of course, did not have much character development in the comic books, at least nothing that I could remember that I enjoyed. He was pretty weak, but by the time that the cartoon had become very popular, I mean, everybody was saying Cowabunga and Radical. You know, like that's just such great thinking by the people that had created this cartoon. April O'Neil was a reporter, as we talked about earlier. April O'Neil was not originally a reporter, and Splinter was originally a human in the comic books, and he was originally a rat in the comic books. He was originally a human in the cartoon, which is also a very stark difference. You're taking this a whole new direction. And normally, I know Donald and Kevin, I'll speak for you on this as well. I know you guys are avid about people not altering the story that's in front of them. But you have to admit this worked.
Yes, and I understood. For that medium, it made sense.
Well, also keep in mind, when they created the Ninja Turtles, we weren't all that very old. So our mindsets on this weren't quite developed yet.
Right, we're mature enough to understand.
Right, and the fact that I still think it makes more sense that they each do have different colored bandanas that they're wearing.
Yes.
To separate, I mean, I know we would all, like, I get it, they all look the same. And all the turtles look the same, and they all wore the same colored bandanas. I'd get confused even if, like, I was related to them, and if I had brothers and we all looked the same.
Yeah, quadruplets.
And we wore the same clothing all the time. That would be tough too.
Right.
So for me, as a kid, that was very good. Each one, yes, had their own distinct weapon.
But it was easier to distinguish who was wearing the color.
Right.
mask.
But it was much easier to distinguish when they didn't have their weapons out who was who.
And for those of you who are into grave detail and like to look in the nether regions, they had different belt buckles.
Yes, they did.
Yep.
All right. Now, this cartoon debuted on December 28th of 1987 as a 5-part miniseries on CBS. Okay. It really didn't get its syndication until October 1st in 1988, and it became a popular Saturday morning cartoon. But it was 13 episodes though for that first season. Now, the important date to me is September 8th of 1990. Why, you say? That is the debut of the big song and the brand new credit sequence. This is when it took a whole new direction for me.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the thing that's kind of funny is that not only was this TV series extremely popular, it made the comics popular once again. There was a point, the comics at one point were selling 125,000 issues a month. Think about that.
Amazing.
I can't stress enough too, this is, and we've said this in previous pods, but it bears repeating, this is what we would consider more of an independent comic story. This is not Marvel, this is not DC, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the independents, but they just don't sell the same way.
That's true.
And to take something like this, and there's a lot of vision, there's some brilliant marketing, and it's not like a one-shot, dead in the pan kind of thing. Like,
Right.
This is stuff that really, carried on for a lengthy period of time.
And this was pre-Image Comics. This was creator-owned, really.
Yes, true.
The big boon on that. They spearheaded. They were visionaries, Eastman and Laird.
Yep.
For sure.
And, at this point, too, in the early 90s, this cartoon was airing 5 days a week on 125 TV stations.
Yeah, it was syndicated, yeah. So they put it, you could see it, I think it was like 4 or 4:30 p.m. I would have my mom set the VCR to record it. There would be 2 episodes sometimes. It'd be like at 4 and then 4:30. And I wouldn't make it home sometimes till 4:40 or something like that. And I was like, Mom, you've got to record Ninja Turtles. Because to me, I didn't know, but it felt like some of the episodes that were on CBS was not played via syndication and vice versa. Like, they even had different openings at times. So I'd be like, oh shoot, like did they make 2 different series at the same time, or what did they do? This is me as a kid, and I was like, I got to see them all. So Saturday morning cartoons, but one of the greatest things my dad taught me is sleep is important and value it. And we had VCRs, so what I would do is I would get up early enough to see the Ninja Turtles live, like on television, but I would not get up to watch anything before that. So I set the VCR to record, had my VHS tape put in there. I'd record all the cartoons, and even though I watched it live, I still recorded the Ninja Turtles so I could watch it again later. This is how important that shit was.
I mean, how many things that are made in the modern day, no disrespect to artists of today, do you even think of watching a second time?
That's true. Not too much.
No, I mean, there's so many, and no offense to DC, but there's so many DC movies I barely got through once, let alone wanting to watch.
And another thing, too, is, like, there were other comics that were out, basically at the same time, or other cartoons. The reason I say this, I've never, ever seen an episode of My Little Pony. However, that type of a cartoon was specifically marketed to one group of people.
That's true.
That was a pretty exclusive thing in the 80s, you would see. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, despite being pretty male-dominated, was really embraced by everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think that for its time, that was stunning stuff. And especially at the fact that they succeeded taking liberties. I mean, to think about the word turtle power, right. That was a cultural phenomena.
Yep.
This is not something.
And also Cowabunga.
Yes, like I said, Cowabunga and Radical earlier,
Yep.
And the fact that they, what they kind of put into the cartoon that wasn't in the comic is their love of pizza.
Yep.
Man, I'll tell you what.
And by the way, a lot of the pizza, like Pizza Hut, they certainly appreciated that.
The 2 tastiest pizzas I've ever seen was the first pizza in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, and of course Kevin McAllister's in Home Alone.
Yeah.
That always makes me want to eat pizza. But as I had mentioned earlier, as I flip through the old pages here, when you have certain characters, another stark difference, I really, of course, I love Shredder. But I don't like to jump on that bandwagon, because everybody loves Shredder. I get that. But I love Krang, too.
Oh, me too.
And that stark difference
I love Krang.
there. Like we had mentioned on a previous pod, I mean, Krang in the comics is horrible.
Well, he's like the stomach eating. That's what they are. Basically, it comes out the stomach, and they eat food. But it's not the same type of character.
Right.
Kind of boring.
Well, sure. But the thing is like, what I'm getting more towards is, like, in the comics, he's destroying entire races of people. He's banished from Dimension X, but there's kind of a light humor in the cartoon that makes that character to me very memorable.
And his voice.
Of course.
Shredder?
Yeah.
Krang!
In the Archie comics, though, they phased him out. He only came in a few times.
Really?
Yeah. The main antagonist of the Archie series was primarily, like, they would introduce new characters and then they would throw the Shredder in there a lot. So it was a Shredder and new characters, and then once in a while they would pepper in Krang and Rocksteady and Bebop, but otherwise...
Any Baxter?
Occasionally there'd be a Baxter Stockman, but not much, to be honest. It was a lot of different new characters. A lot of that got put into action figures because they were like, sure, why not? So...
Well, and I'll tell you, part of the reason I never got beat up as a little kid is because I was watching the Ninja Turtles. And, I just think that it's tough today because so many years pass by in our lives and we forget that this was popular beyond belief. And I don't want to say it didn't age well, because if you rewatch the cartoons via YouTube or whatever, they're still very entertaining and good. You just don't think about them like you used to. Mm-hmm. And revisiting them, especially for this podcast, was a major pleasure for me to do.
And let us not forget, James Avery was the voice of the Shredder.
That he was.
Yep.
He was the late James Avery. May he rest in peace.
Yes.
Uncle Phil from the Fresh Prince.
Yep. And just real quick, the Archie comics also did publish the movie adaptations of the Ninja Turtles, the first, the second, and the third movie adaptation. But we'll dive in a little more into the movie.
In part 2.
Yeah, in part 2. Oh, sorry to interrupt, everyone. Just wanted to mention real quick about a shop in Canoga Park, California called Spiro's Heroes. Elliot, the proprietor of the store, has over 300,000 books in what's called the Temple of Comics. That's Spiro Heroes in Canoga Park, spirosheroes.com. And with the Archie series also, just to let you know, they did actually publish the comic book version adaptations of the first movie, second movie, and third movie.
You don't say.
Yeah, but we'll get a little bit more into that in the Part 2 podcast, which we'll be diving into next.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, so with that, thank you for coming out. Thank you for listening. My name is Donald.
My name is Kevin.
I am not Spartacus.
Yes, he's not. And maybe we'll see you
At the comic shop. Boy!
This has been The Real Short Box. We'll see you at the comic shop. Thanks for listening.
Heroes in a half shell, and
And
they're green.
Figured as much.
Like my name.